Hello and welcome to another video on the Maestro workflow engine by Nextide. In this video, we'll be looking at one of the Maestro AI Task example flows that comes with the Maestro AI Task module. Links provided in the description below for our introduction video on the Maestro AI Task module, as well as where you can get the entire Maestro workflow engine for free, including documentation. You can visit our website for blog posts and to get in contact with us for any Maestro or Drupal related assistance you may need. The example we're going to look at today involves a scenario where you're going to check the validity of receipts submitted for an expense report. Let's take a look at a flowchart. Here's a simple flowchart showing what our workflow example will perform. We start the process by submitting an expense report. We then offload checking of the receipt to AI. If there's an issue with the receipt, we loop back to the initiator, or the submitter, of the expense report with the reason for rejection and allow them to rectify the issue, looping back to AI to validate the receipt with any alterations to the reasoning of why they submitted the receipt. This looping can continue until such time that the receipt is deemed valid by AI. When AI determines that the receipt is indeed valid, we move the process forward to a final human financial approval right here. If the finance person rejects the receipt, again, it will go back to the initiator. And from there, the initiator can do any alterations, corrections, change the receipt, add a reason. And again, it'll go back to AI for validation, and this process can repeat over and over and over. Ultimately, when the finance person accepts the report, we complete the process. So just to note, this is just an example of how you can use Maestro AI to perform routine tasks that are time-consuming for humans to perform. This is not meant to be a full expense report validation mechanism. Taking a look at the templates installed on my system, you'll see the following: the simple parallel to serial. This is installed by Maestro Core to quickly perform logic tests on your installation. And here we have Maestro AI expense receipt checking simple and complex examples. These are two examples that are installed with the Maestro AI Task example module that comes with the Maestro AI Task. We're going to focus on the simple example for this video. Let's also take a look at the web form we're using for our expense report. Again, this is just an example flow to focus attention on how Maestro AI works and not a full-blown expense form implementation. So for this particular example, we have the ability to upload exactly one receipt image and provide an explanation for that receipt. We also have the expense total field. Hidden on this web form is a field which we populate with any rejection information that comes from our AI task. We'll see that in action as we use the workflow. This web form has been configured to launch a Maestro workflow on its submission. The simple expense example only validates receipts and doesn't validate the total dollars claimed in the report. We're focusing on one area for this example. Going back to the templates, let's take a closer look at how we've automated the process that we saw earlier in this flowchart. What you see here is how we automate the receipt checking in Maestro. Let me explain and make a few things clear. The green box here is start, where the process starts, obviously. And the red box here is where the process ends. Gold boxes are logic tasks run by the Maestro engine, here, 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 and here. No human interaction. Gray boxes are batch functions. We've only got one here. This is custom code that is run by the Maestro engine. No human interaction. Light blue boxes is the AI task. AI will run this task. No human interaction. And finally, the dark blue boxes, here and here, are interactive tasks. They're tasks completed by humans. So first, just by following the arrows around, you'll see that we have two sections that loop over itself. The first loop that I'm showing here is where we've offloaded receipt checking to AI. The second loop shown here is where humans performing the final validation. Let's look at what each step in the Maestro workflow does. First of all, this flow is started by submitting the web form for simple expense report. This one here. Once started, that web form is attached to the process that runs this template. So we can reference that web form submission to pull the values out of it that matter to our workflow. Namely, that will be the receipt and the receipt description, so that we can pass that information to the AI validator. That's what these first 3 gold box steps here do. They are as follows. Set the image file. We set a variable local to the process, called a process variable, that stores the receipt image file. Keep in mind that this will be unique each and every time this workflow template is put into production. Next, we clear any messages that may have previously come from AI validation. Again, this is a process variable. And finally, we set a process variable to the receipt description to what the initiator has typed into their web form receipt description box. So up to this point here in the workflow, we've submitted an expense report that includes a receipt and potentially an explanation of that receipt. We've spawned a Maestro workflow process that follows this particular template, and we've set a process variable, or 3 of them in this case, to the values submitted by the user from the web form. Next, we involve AI in this blue task here. This blue task shown here is where we let AI determine the receipt uploaded combined with the receipt explanation is valid. At no point will there be human intervention here. We let AI determine if what the user submitted is valid or not based on some simple rules. Those rules are if the receipt appears to be invalid or fake, and second, if it contains alcohol, reject the receipt unless there's a compelling reason not to from the receipt description. We then check if the AI task returns an error here. And if so, we use a Maestro batch function, custom code, to set the rejection reason field on the web form with what the AI task's error was. Ultimately, we assign a human executable task shown here, a Maestro web form task, that will show the initiator of this process their web form, the rejection message, and allow them to provide a receipt description or change the receipt. Once the user is done, we start our loop over again and set a process variable to the receipt that's been uploaded, clear the AI message, set the receipt description, and so on, and once again we let AI determine the validity of the receipt. If AI validation passes, here, we provide a human executable task for finance to check out the receipt. If they reject it, we loop back to the initiator, and then process repeats itself again. If finance accepts it, we just end the process here. Let me now demo this working for you. First though, a few notes. It would be confusing if I were to bounce back and forth between different users. So we're just going to use one user to submit the expense report, to perform any edits to the report based on our AI or finance feedback, and to perform the final finance approval. In reality, the final finance approval would go to a finance person or people in a finance role. In a real workflow, we let AI tabulate the receipt to be sure that what they're expensing is legitimate. We'd have tasks after the finance approval here to send it off for import into any financial systems, etc., and to provide any post-approval tasks for people to do. Later in this video, we'll go through the settings for each task in the flow. Alright, so now let's just run through the process from the perspective of the end user submitting. Our Maestro orchestrator, the Maestro engine, will be running very frequently to keep our processes moving forward. Here's the receipt that we're going to be using. It's a made-up receipt for a restaurant that totals properly, but includes 2 alcoholic beverages. Remember, according to the way we've set up this Maestro AI task, AI will inspect this receipt to see if it is valid and if it has alcohol. If it has alcohol, it will reject the receipt without any valid explanation from the submitter. So let's just fill in our expense report. I'll fill in this report with the fake receipt. And here it is. And I will omit the receipt description for this example. Since we're not validating the totals, I'll just use any numeric value in here and we will submit. The message that appears here, the submitted your expense report to finance, comes from the settings of our Spawn Maestro Workflow web form handler that is configured on the web form. So at this point, we've got a started process that is following our template. Within that process is a linkage to our just submitted web form. So let's flip over to our task console to see if AI has approved this receipt. And lo and behold, we have a rejection task. Let's take a look at our workflow template first. We're here, a human executable task assigned to the initiator of the workflow to review why their expense report has been rejected. Let's go back to the task console. And by executing this task, it'll bring up the web form edit. Here you can see your submission, including the rejection reason, which came directly from the AI LLM via the Maestro AI Task. We can now alter the receipt, or add to our description of the receipt, and submit. I'll just add a reason here to see if that satisfies the AI finance check. Let's see. My manager approved alcohol. This customer. Okay. And I'll submit. Now the Maestro Orchestrator has run numerous times, and now, as you can see, we've been assigned the final finance human review. Let's go back to our template. We're now here because it would appear that the AI task has actually approved our receipt based on the receipt and our description. Now, keeping in mind that for the purposes of this demo, we're assigning the financial approval to ourselves, but in reality, it would be assigned to a finance person or a finance role. Let's go back to the task console and execute our task. And here, as a finance person, I can review the web form submission and decide to accept or reject it from here. I'll just accept, which in turn completes the workflow. Now that we've completed the demo, why don't we take a look at how it's actually been built. First things first, the expense report. If we remember, the expense form looked like this. Let's go back to our form, nice and simple. And this is how it's been built. We have a date field set to the current date as its default, a file upload for the receipt upload, the description field, which is just a text area. The rejection reason is a text field, and we have conditional logic in here, completely done in web form. There's no custom coding here, as you see, that if the rejection reason is filled, we make it visible. And so this is how we keep it hidden from view from the end user until such time that it actually has been filled in. And then the expense total, which is just a number. What's important to note here is under its settings and under emails and handlers, we have the Spawn Maestro workflow handler, which, as you see how it's been configured, we have the Maestro template as being our simple receipt checking example, and we have our success and failure messages in the event it successfully launched the workflow or unsuccessfully launched the workflow. So let's take a look at our workflow itself. So again, this particular template will be spawned when this web form spawns the Maestro workflow template for us. Once the template goes into production, it's called a process. And from here, we have access to process variables. And that's what we do at these first three steps. Let's take a look at the first one. We're setting the image file, and we're using a set process variable helper plugin option. We'll set a process variable called image file, and what we're doing is looking into the submission for a field called receipt upload. If you recall, we created our let me just go back to the build. We've created a receipt upload field, and that's what we are populating inside of our image file process variable. We cleared the AI message. In fact, we just make it a dash so it's clear, it's not actual text, it's something that we can test for. And then we also use a process variable helper plugin to look at the web form submission, its receipts description. And again, going back to the expense report, it's this field here. So again, up to this point, all we've done is allowed the process to start by submission of a web form, and setting 3 or clearing 1 and setting 2 process variables, all for the AI task. And this is where things get interesting. If we edit the AI task, you'll see how we've configured it. Nothing up here, we're not doing anything special in terms of logging or holding the task open or participating in any workflow stages or status messages. Where the magic happens is here. We manage the chat with image vision operation type. And what we're doing is feeding the source of the image that we're using image vision on via a process variable. And we use the image file process variable. We have all of our actual process variables available to be chosen, but image file was the one that we set back here, if you recall. Okay, let's look back at the AI task. And the second piece of magic happens here in the prompt. And this is what I'm telling AI to do. It's a finance employee. That each receipt that you're looking at may have an explanation. It may not, which might be missing or irrelevant or applicable to a different receipt. Evaluate carefully. And what I'm telling it to do is, if there's alcohol found on the receipt, return a brief explanation less than 250 characters containing the word alcohol, so we know it's actually alcohol is the reason. However, if the explanation mentions managerial approval, client hospitality, or customer appreciation, do not flag the receipt for alcohol. If the receipt appears invalid, return a brief explanation, less than 250 characters again, containing the word invalid. And if no issues are found, return a single dash. And we're telling the LLM to ignore irrelevant explanations when the receipt is otherwise valid, and only provide explanations when alcohol is present or the receipt is invalid. And here's where we use a token, where we're using a process variable's value within and plugging it into this prompt. And again, we've set the receipt description process variable, shown here, in this task here. We set the receipt description to the submission's receipt description field. So once that AI task runs, in fact, we'll just take a look at the end of it here, we'll return the value that the AI LLM task receives in return and sets it to a process variable called message. From this point, we detect if the message is not equal to dash. If you recall, we set the AI message to dash, and in the prompt, we said if there's nothing wrong with this, set it to a dash. So if message is set to dash, there's no problem, and we would go on to the final finance human review. Otherwise, we run this batch function. And this batch function is a piece of code, which I won't show, but we do include inside of the example workflows, that will set this field, rejection reason, to the value of the process variable called message. Okay, and that message again was set here in the AI task. It will either be the reason why the receipt was rejected for alcohol or for any other reason that it's invalid, or it'll be a dash if there are no issues that are found. So of course, if no issues are found, it'll never get here because it is a dash. And the web form reviewer issue with receipt task again looks at the submission. We show the edit form. We skip any Maestro web form submission handlers. We've got a lot of documentation on this, but what we don't want to happen is that when somebody hits save on that web form, we don't want it kicking off the actual expense report, because again, we've got this handler on here to spawn Maestro workflows. We don't want the submission of this task that we're configuring right now to spawn another workflow. And again, assignment details are just to the initiator of the workflow. And this loop continues, as we noted, over and over and over until such time that the receipt message is just a dash. And once it's just a dash, meaning that the receipt is clean, it's clear, we show this web form submission, skipping any Maestro web form submission handlers. Again, we're setting it to the initiator, and this is just how we do the final finance human review. We are not using the edit form, we're just using the submission display form. And again, we detect if the finance person has accepted or rejected this task, and if they've rejected it, as we'll see here, by last task status being canceled, that means rejection. We've canceled that task. It will continue on again, assigning the issue with a receipt, and so on and so forth, and that's how this loop works. And ultimately we end. It's a very brief and quick description on how this workflow works. And we do have another example workflow called the complex workflow example. That one in particular will have another video, and it is where we actually show how you can use another looping mechanism to use multiple, if we go back here, multiple receipt uploads. Currently this is a singular image file. What we can do is actually have this be multiple image uploads with multiple receipt descriptions, with multiple return values specifying why the receipt has been rejected. It becomes a much more complex example, and therefore the workflow is much more complex. But that's for our second video. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, please leave them in the comments below. And if you'd like to get a hold of us, please go to our website at nextide.ca and hit contact and let us know if you've got any ideas that you'd like to pursue. And also if we can help you through anything with Drupal and or Maestro.